The first night I worked alone at the Bell Creek travel stop. The manager handed me a ring of keys, a stained apron, and a folded piece of paper with 6 rules written on it in blocky black marker. He didn't smile when he gave it to me. That should have told me something. The Bell Creek travel stop sat off Route 19, about 20 miles outside the nearest real town, if you could call Bell Creek a town at all. It was a gas station, a single diner booth by the front window, a wall of dusty motor oil, a humming beer cooler, and a bathroom that always smelled faintly like bleach and rust no matter how much you cleaned it. Outside, there were 6 pumps beneath a flickering canopy and a gravel lot big enough for a few semis and the local drunks to turn around in. Behind the station, there was nothing but woods. Not pretty woods, not postcard woods, just black timber climbing low hills, old trees grown too close together, with a drainage ditch running along the back edge of the property that never seemed to dry out. Even in summer, the ground back there looked damp and sour, like something had seeped into it years ago and stayed. I took the job because I needed one fast. My divorce had finalized 3 months earlier. My ex-wife kept the apartment in Beckley, and I kept my truck, 2 duffel bags, and a talent for pretending I wasn't more relieved than heartbroken. I'd spent the first month after that sleeping in a motel, the second bouncing between friends' couches, and by the time I saw the sign for night cashier wanted in the Bell Creek window, I was down to the kind of money that makes a person stop being proud. The manager's name was Daryl Sutton, a heavyset man in his 50s with a nicotine voice and a face that always looked vaguely annoyed to still be alive. He interviewed me standing by the coffee station while refilling powdered creamer canisters. Shifts 11 to 7, he said. Pay ain't great. Most nights are dead. You stay awake, don't rob the till, and don't lock the doors unless I tell you. You can do that. Yeah. You got a problem being alone? No. That wasn't true, but it also wasn't false in the way that mattered. I'd been alone in crowded rooms for years. Daryl glanced out the front windows toward the pumps. A single moth kept hurling itself against the glass. Night shift's easy, he said, until it isn't. Then he handed me the paper. I unfolded it. It read, 1. Keep the coffee fresh, even if nobody's there to drink it. 2. If the ice machine outside starts dispensing by itself, do not go out back to check the lines. 3. At 3:07 a.m., if a customer comes in asking for cigarettes but won't name a brand, do not make conversation. Ring up the matches. He will leave exact change. 4. If he asks what day it is, tell him the truth. If he asks what year it is, do not answer. 5. If the payphone behind the building rings, let it ring. 6. If you hear knocking on the freezer door from the inside, turn the radio up and wait until it stops. I looked up from the page. Daryl was watching me, like a man waiting to see whether a dog would bite. This supposed to be some kind of joke? No. What customer? You'll know him. I laughed a little then, because if I didn't laugh, I'd have to admit the rules made the back of my neck feel cold. Daryl took a drag from the cigarette tucked behind his ear, though it wasn't lit, then leaned one elbow on the counter. Kid, he said, and I was 34, but everyone over 50 in southern West Virginia still calls you kid when they want to sound tired. You ever worked nights long enough? You learn every place has its habits. This one's got a few more than most. That doesn't explain anything. It explains enough. Then he slapped the counter twice with his palm and went back to the office. That was my training. The first 2 nights were so ordinary, I almost convinced myself the rules were just a hazing routine for new hires. A couple truckers came through around midnight, bought black coffee and jerky, and complained about a wreck south of Summersville. A teenager and a mud cake side by side bought chewing tobacco with quarters and called me boss, like we were in a Western. One old woman in a church sweatshirt came in and asked if the diner used to serve peach pie back when the station was a truck stop. And when I said I didn't know, she nodded as if that confirmed something private and left. The hours between 2 and 4 were the worst. That dead stretch where time quits behaving right. The fluorescent lights buzz louder. The coffee starts to smell burnt no matter how fresh it is. Your own reflection in the front windows looks like a stranger standing just behind you. The Bell Creek station had an old radio mounted under the cabinet by the cigarette rack, and I kept it tuned low to a classic country station out of Charleston, just to have another human voice around. George Jones, Loretta Lynn, static, farm reports, weather updates. Enough noise to hold the dark off the glass. The station also had a payphone behind the building. I didn't notice it until my third night. It sat on the outer brick wall past the ice machine and around the blind corner where the security light barely reached. Rusted metal box, handset hanging by a cord gone gray with age. Weeds pushing up through the cracked concrete beneath it. It looked so out of place, I almost thought it had to be disconnected. Then I remembered Rule 5. If the payphone behind the building rings, let it ring. I almost asked Daryl about it during the shift change at 7 that morning. But there was something about the way he counted the till, quick fingers, eyes down, no interest in conversation unless he started it, that made me keep my mouth shut. By the fourth night, I knew the rhythms of the place. Which pump stuck on regular unless you reset it twice. Which cooler door never closed all the way unless you kicked it at the bottom. Which stretches of the hour the highway went silent enough that you could hear the fluorescent bulbs humming over the freezer cases. That was also the first night I noticed the clock on the register was 1 minute slow. Happens all the time. Still, I reset it. At exactly 3:07, the bell over the front door rang. I turned, expecting headlights in the lot. There were none. A man stood just inside the entrance, as if he had stepped out of the dark itself instead of walking from a vehicle. He was tall, though stooped some through the shoulders, and wore a brown jacket that might once have been leather or canvas, but now looked worn, almost shiny at the seams. His jeans were dark with old stains. His boots were work boots, the kind linemen or rig hands wear. Mud dried up the sides of them in a pale crust. He had on a ball cap with no logo I could see, and kept the brim low enough that the fluorescent lights threw most of his face in shadow. For a second, I thought he was just another late-night local. Then he looked up. His skin was gray in the way meat turns gray when it has sat too long in cold water. Not dead gray, worse, white paper gray. And his eyes had the wrong shine to them, as if light was reflecting off something deeper than the eyeball. He smiled at me without warmth. "Need cigarettes," he said. His voice sounded rubbed raw. Not deep, not high. Just dry enough that I pictured dirt. "What kind?" He stared at me. Not blankly, not like he hadn't heard. More like I had asked something foolish. Then I remembered Rule 3. If a customer comes in asking for cigarettes, but won't name a brand, do not make conversation. Ring up the matches. He will leave exact change. The little hairs on my arms stood up. "Matches," I said instead, reaching beneath the counter. The man nodded once. I rang up a box of diamond kitchen matches. 79 cents. He reached into his jacket pocket and laid 3 quarters and 4 pennies on the counter. Exact change. I did not touch his hand, though he left the money close enough that I could have. His fingers were long, cracked, and black, beneath the nails like he worked in soil or grease, or something that didn't wash off. I slid the matches toward him. He looked past me at the cigarettes behind the counter. Row after row of cartons and packs stacked under fluorescent light. Then he asked, "What day is it?" My mouth had gone dry. I had to swallow before I could answer. "Thursday." He nodded again like that meant something. Then he turned and walked back out the front door. The bell jingled once. I rushed to the window. The lot was empty. No truck, no taillights, no movement by the pumps, nothing. The whole station sat under the canopy lights like a photograph. I told myself he had cut across the dark side of the lot fast, that I had only looked down to set the matches out and missed whatever vehicle he climbed into. That lack of sleep and fluorescent light do strange things to faces. I told myself a lot of things after that. Then, at 3:11, the payphone behind the building started ringing. A payphone doesn't sound like a cell phone. It sounds lonely. Sharp metal bells, old and insistent, the kind of ring built to cut through traffic and rain and bad weather. I froze behind the counter, listening. The sound came again and again. Not from out front, not from the road, from behind the building, exactly where the payphone sat. I stared toward the back hallway that led to the storeroom and the rear exit. Rule 5, let it ring. So I did. It rang 12 times, stopped. Then the ice machine outside started dispensing cubes into its bin with a hard, chattering crash that made me jump so badly I knocked a rack of sunflower seeds sideways. Rule 2. Do not go out back to check the lines. I stayed where I was. The ice kept dropping for maybe 20 seconds, way more than any customer could have paid for, then ceased all at once. I didn't go outside the rest of that shift. When Daryl came in at 7, I told him about the man. I expected skepticism, maybe a smirk. Instead, Daryl just rubbed at the stubble on his jaw and asked, "What'd he ask?" "Cigarettes." "What'd you sell him?" "Matches." He asked the day. "Yeah." And I told him. Daryl nodded like I had correctly completed a form. "Good. That's it?" "That's it." "You're not going to explain what the hell that was?" He started counting the till. "No." I watched him for a long moment. Has anybody ever answered the year? His hands paused for the briefest second over the 20s. Then they kept moving. "Not twice," he said. That answer sat in my head all day like a stone. By the end of the first week, Bell Creek had started getting into me. Sleep during the day became strange and thin. I'd wake to the rattle of my motel air conditioner, convinced I had heard the bell over the gas station door. I started checking clocks whenever I passed them without meaning to, always watching the minutes slide toward 3:07 as if that time had become an appointment I had never agreed to keep. The man came every night, not always through the front. Twice he was just suddenly there at the coffee station with his back half turned to me, standing as silent as a coat on a hanger. Once I looked up from sweeping and saw him reflected in the cooler doors before I saw him in the room. Every time, the same routine. Need cigarettes. No brand. Matches. Exact change. What day is it? And then he'd leave. On the 7th night, I made the mistake of watching his feet. His boots came in dirty every time. Mud, gray grit, clinging leaves, yet he never tracked anything across the floor. No prints, no water, no dirt. Just that dry, wrong shuffle, like his soles barely wanted the linoleum. At 3:07 on the 9th night, he did something new. He picked up one of the fresh coffee pots on the warmer and looked into the black surface, like he was checking for his reflection. Then he said, "Still hot." I didn't answer. He set the pot down, very carefully. When I rang up the matches, he laid down the coins and asked, "What day is it?" "Tuesday." He glanced toward the front windows. "Storm's coming Tuesday." I kept my mouth shut. The weather report had called for clear skies. He smiled without humor, took the matches, and walked out. At 4:10, rain hit the canopy so hard the whole building sounded like it was under gravel. No weather alert had mentioned it. No clouds had been visible when he left. One minute the highway was dry, the next it was vanishing under sheets of black summer rain. After that, I started listening harder, not just to him, to the building. The Bell Creek station had sounds that were normal and sounds that weren't. The pop of the coolers kicking on, the tick of the coffee burners, the compressor thump from the soda fountain. Those I learned. Then there were the others. A drag along the outer wall by the back storeroom around 2:30 most nights, like someone trailing a branch across brick. A clink from the freezer cases that sounded almost like a glass bottle tapping once from inside. The soft jangle of the bell over the door, when the door hadn't moved. By the 12th night, I had started keeping notes. Not because I thought it would help, because writing things down made them feel less like they were happening inside my head. Then came the night he asked what year it was. It was a Monday, or maybe Tuesday morning by then. I remember that much because a school bus had blown a tire on the highway earlier in the evening, and we had gotten a rush of irritated parents and one deputy sheriff buying 5 packs of gum and 2 energy drinks. By 2:50, the station was empty again. I had just finished mopping the coffee area when the radio under the cabinet lost the country station in a burst of static. I frowned and smacked the side of it. The static deepened. Then a man's voice pushed through so briefly, I thought I imagined it. "Please." Then more static. Then silence. No signal. I bent to retune it and heard the bell over the front door ring. 3:07 on the register. The man stood by the chip rack, rainwater glistening on the shoulders of his jacket. That was new too. It hadn't rained. He walked to the counter. Need cigarettes. I swallowed. Matches. I rang them up. 79 cents. He placed the coins down one by one this time. Quarter, 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 penny, 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 penny. Each one clicked like a nail tapping a headstone. Then he looked at me longer than usual. What day is it? Monday. He kept staring. Something in my chest tightened. Then he asked, what year is it? The whole station seemed to go still around the words. Not quieter, still. The buzz of the lights, the hum of the coolers, the faint tire noise from the highway. All of it seemed to pull back half an inch, waiting. Every rule Daryl had handed me came up in my head at once. Do not answer. I opened my mouth anyway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was anger. Maybe I had gotten too used to the routine and started mistaking familiarity for control. It's 2026, I said. The man's eyes changed. That is the best way I know to describe it. Not widened, not narrowed, changed. The surface shine in them went dark and deep like water in a mine shaft. For one terrible second, he looked not confused, not startled, but offended, like I had accused him of something. Then he smiled. This time there was warmth in it. Too much. Well, he said softly, that can't be right. The front windows shuddered, both of them, a hard, concussive wham against the glass from outside, like something large had thrown itself into the building. I shouted and stumbled backward from the counter. The man didn't flinch. Another slam hit the left window, then another. The blinds above the diner booth rattled. Outside, under the canopy, I saw movement. Tall shapes darting in and out of the spill of fluorescent light too quickly for me to count. The man on the other side of the counter never turned to look. He just slipped the matches into his jacket pocket and said, almost kindly, shouldn't have told me that. Then he walked toward the door. I found my voice enough to yell, wait. He opened the door. The bell rang once. The parking lot outside was empty. The slamming stopped the instant he crossed the threshold. The door swung shut behind him. At 3:09, the payphone behind the building began to ring. At 3:10, the freezer door at the back started knocking from the inside. I don't remember deciding to turn the radio up. I just remember Daryl's stupid rule flashing through my head as those knocks began. 3 soft strikes from inside the walk-in freezer, then 2 harder ones, then a dragging scrape across the metal like fingernails. I lunged beneath the counter and cranked the radio volume until static and music blasted through the station. Some old Conway Twitty song tore out of the speaker, half drowned in interference. I turned it up louder. The knocking kept going anyway. The payphone rang. Something tapped once against the back door glass. I stood there breathing through my mouth, holding the mop handle like a weapon and staring at the hallway. Then through the music, I heard a voice call my name from the freezer. Not loudly, soft, muffled by the metal. Evan. My blood went cold. Nobody at Bell Creek knew me well enough yet to use that voice. It was my ex-wife. Not exactly the way she sounded toward the end. Not clipped and tired and done with me. Earlier. Softer. The version from years ago, before the apartment, before the silence at dinner, before the legal paperwork and the split furniture and the mutual relief neither of us could say out loud. Evan. The freezer called again. Knock, knock. You left your phone in here. I backed into the counter so hard, I felt the edge dig into my spine. The payphone behind the building was still ringing. The voice in the freezer laughed very quietly. I turned the radio up until the speaker distorted, and then I waited. The knocking went on for what felt like forever, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, long enough for my legs to shake. Then, slowly, it stopped. The payphone rang twice more and fell silent. By 3:30, the station was just a gas station again. Daryl found me sitting on an overturned milk crate behind the counter at 7, pale and sweating through my shirt. He took one look at me and said, "You answered." I nodded. He closed his eyes for a moment like a man with a recurring back injury. "What'd you say?" "The year." He swore under his breath. "What happens now?" I asked. Daryl didn't answer right away. He walked to the coffee station, dumped out a pot, and started brewing a new one, like fresh coffee. Was some ritual older than language? Finally, he said, "He'll remember you better." What the hell does that mean? Daryl looked toward the front windows. Means you ain't part of the building anymore. That sentence hit me worse than if he'd shouted, "What?" He came back behind the counter and leaned both hands on it. "You think Bell Creek's the problem?" he said. "It ain't. The station just gives him somewhere to keep coming back to. Structure matters to things like that. Doors, counters, roofs, clocks, places with routines. But the rules are what keep it local." I stared at him. Things like what? He looked older suddenly. Not worn down. Ancient. "In 1987, he said, before this was Bell Creek Travel Stop, it was Mercer Fuel and Dine. Different pumps, different owner, same slab, same payphone out back. One October night, a coal hauler jackknifed on the wet curve just north of here. Took the guardrail, rolled the truck, and went over into the ditch by the tree line. Truck caught. Driver burned alive before anybody could pull him free. I could see he had more. I could also see he hated it. When they got the fire out, he said, they couldn't settle on what they'd found in the cab. Sheriff said it looked like he'd been trying to crawl out the windshield but kept dragging himself back toward the seat. One trooper swore there was another man in there with him. Nobody else saw that. Story changed depending on who was drinking and who wasn't. He lit the cigarette he'd kept tucked behind his ear. Station owner shut down for 3 days. Reopened on the 4th. First night back, a man came in at 3:07 asking for cigarettes. I felt the station around us differently after that. Not haunted exactly. Anchored. "You've seen him since then?" I asked. "Not me personally. I don't work nights unless I have to. But enough people have." He exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "Some learned the rules. Some didn't. What happened to the ones who didn't?" He looked at me. "You ever notice Bell Creek hires nights a lot?" I didn't say anything. Daryl crushed out the cigarette in the sink. "If you're smart," he said, "you quit." That surprised me almost as much as the story. "You want me to quit?" "I want fewer messes." Then he picked up the till drawer and headed for the office. That should have been enough. I should have grabbed my duffel, left the apron on the counter, and never gone near Route 19 again. Instead, I came back that night, partly because I was broke, partly because pride makes idiots of men who should know better. Mostly because once something terrible picks you out of a crowd, there's a rotten urge to look back at it just to see if it's still staring. It was. The next few nights changed. The man still came at 3:07, still asked for cigarettes, still bought matches. But after I answered the year, he no longer asked what day it was first. Now he would stand at the counter with those deep, wet eyes fixed on me and say, "You know me now." The first time he said it, I almost walked out then and there. Instead, I rang up the matches with shaking hands and said nothing. He smiled. "Almost," he said. Then he left exact change and walked out into darkness. The payphone behind the building started ringing earlier after that, sometimes as soon as 2:40. Sometimes it would ring once and stop, as though testing the air. The ice machine dispensed by itself most nights now, spilling cubes until the metal bin overflowed and sent them skittering across the concrete. I never checked it. I never went around back. And the freezer knocks got worse. At first it was just tapping, then pounding, then long, desperate battering from the inside hard enough to rattle the frame. One night I heard 2 voices in there talking over each other. One of them was my ex-wife. The other was me. I started sleeping with the motel bathroom light on during the day because I couldn't stand waking in the dark. By the 3rd week, Bell Creek had become the center point of my life in a way that felt diseased. Everything else was just waiting to go back. The day was an intermission. 307 was the main event. I found myself glancing at cigarettes in grocery stores and thinking matches instead. I stopped taking the back stairs at the motel because I hated the echo of my own steps in enclosed places. Small things, stupid things, the kind that add up when fear lives in your body long enough to rent the place. Then came the storm. It started just after midnight with a line of black clouds rolling down over the highway and a pressure drop so sudden my ears popped while I stocked the cooler. By 20 city, the rain had set in, hard, relentless. The kind of mountain storm that eats up road paint and makes headlights look underwater. A power line must have gone down south of us because the radio station cut out every 10 minutes and came back with static wrapped around the music. Around 2-8 an 18-wheeler pulled into the lot and idled under the canopy for 20 minutes without the driver coming inside. At 2:27 it pulled away. At 2:41 the lights flickered. At 2:50 the station's power cut out completely. Emergency backup kicked in a second later. Half the lights came back, dimmer and yellower, and the beer coolers groaned like old men. The front windows turned black, mirror dark, beyond the weak wash of canopy light. I called Daryl's number from the store phone. No answer. Thunder rolled over the roof. At 3:03, the payphone behind the building began to ring. Not one ring at a time, continuous. The rain had set in, hard, relentless. The kind of mountain storm that eats up road paint and makes headlights look underwater. A power line must have gone down south of us, because the radio station cut out every 10 minutes and came back with static wrapped around the music. Emergency backup kicked in a second later. Half the lights came back, dimmer and yellower, and the beer coolers groaned like old men. The front windows turned black, mirror dark beyond the weak wash of canopy light. I called Daryl's number from the store phone. No answer. Thunder rolled over the roof. At 3:03, the payphone behind the building began to ring. Not one ring at a time, continuous. A broken, furious clanging that didn't stop. I stood behind the counter staring toward the back hall while the sound pounded through the storm. At 3:05, someone knocked on the front door. Not the glass, the metal frame. 3 slow knocks. I looked up. The man stood outside in the rain, hatless this time, his face clear in the dim emergency light. Most of the left side of it was burned. Not freshly, not gore. Worse than that. Old burn scars pulled the mouth down and left one eyelid half fixed, which made his stare look both sleepy and furious at once. His hair was patchy over that side too, scalp shiny and puckered like melted wax. He smiled at me through the rain. Then he opened the door and stepped inside. There was no water under him, no puddles, no dripping jacket. Nothing. The payphone kept screaming behind the building. "Need cigarettes," he said. My mouth had gone numb. Matches. I rang them up with fingers that barely felt like mine. 79 cents. He placed exact change on the counter. Then he leaned a little closer than he ever had before and said, "The road's closed tonight." I said nothing. He smiled wider. "People are going to come in," he said. "You need to know they ain't all people." Lightning flashed white across the front windows. For an instant, I saw shapes outside under the canopy. 3 of them, standing at different pumps in the rain. The light went out. Darkness rushed back. I looked toward the windows again, but all I could see was the reflection of the dim station interior and the outline of the man at the counter. He asked, "What year is it?" I kept my mouth shut. His smile faded, but not all the way. "Good," he said. "Maybe you'll last." Then the bell over the door jangled, and all at once the station wasn't empty anymore. A woman in a denim jacket rushed in first, soaked through, eyes wide. Behind her came a teenage boy in a school hoodie and an older man in overalls carrying a flashlight. All of them wet from the storm, all of them breathing hard like they had run from the road. The woman looked straight at me. Please, she said. Is the phone working? There's a wreck. I turned back to the man at the counter. He was gone. Just gone. The matches sat where he had left them. The coins were still on the counter. 79 cents. Behind me, the woman said, "Mister?" I looked at her. She looked real. That's a terrible sentence, but there it is. Her hair was plastered to her face with rain. Mascara smudged under one eye. Mud on the knees of her jeans. Hands shaking. The teenage boy looked pale with fear. The older man smelled like wet tobacco and motor oil. All real details. All the details a lie would know to wear. The payphone behind the building was still ringing without pause. The woman's gaze shifted toward the back hall. "Someone's calling," she said. "I know. Well, answer it." No, that came out harder than I meant it to. The boy flinched. Thunder shook the windows. The older man stepped forward and put both hands on the counter. His flashlight beam bounced against the register display. "There's a truck over the embankment," he said. "Driver may still be alive." My stomach dropped. The words felt rehearsed, worn smooth by years. The woman turned and pointed through the dark windows toward the north curve of the highway. "I saw flames," she said. "Please, we need to call somebody." I looked out. Lightning flashed again. For just a second, the curve of the road lit up beyond the pumps, rain slashing silver through the air. There was no wreck, no taillights, no fire, no guardrail damage, nothing. When the darkness snapped back, the three strangers were watching me too closely, like actors waiting to see whether I'd miss my line. The freezer door at the back slammed once from the inside. All four of us jumped, except maybe the older man. He moved slower, like he had expected it. The woman turned toward the sound. "What was that?" I heard Daryl's voice in my head for once, as clear as if he were beside me. "The rules are what keep it local. If I opened the wrong door, answered the wrong question, followed the wrong voice." No. I straightened behind the counter and said, "Store's closed." The older man frowned. "It's a 24-hour station. Not tonight." The teenage boy took one step toward the back hall. "I think somebody's in there." I slammed my hand on the counter hard enough to make them all jump. "Don't." All three faces changed. Not dramatically, not in a movie monster way. Subtly. The woman's panic smoothed out first, like a hand flattening wet paper. The boy's eyes seemed to deepen. The older man's mouth stretched a little too wide at the corners. Then all three of them looked toward the front windows at once. A new set of headlights swung into the lot. Real headlights. A county sheriff SUV rolled beneath the canopy and stopped at pump 2. For one bright, dizzy second, relief hit me so hard I nearly laughed. The driver's door opened. Deputy Alan Pike stepped out, shoulders hunched against the rain, hand on his hat. I knew him. Not well, but enough. He had bought gum and energy drinks the week before. He started toward the door. I turned back to the three strangers. They were gone. No doorbell, no footsteps, no movement. Just empty floor between the chip rack and the diner booth. Deputy Pike came in dripping rain and looking irritated. "Power's out all the way to Bell Junction," he said. "You all right in here?" I think I stared at him too long because he frowned. "Sir?" "There were people just in here." He glanced around. "Don't see him now." My throat felt tight. A woman, teen kid, older guy, said there was a wreck. Deputy Pike's expression changed in a way I didn't like. What'd the woman look like? I described her. He went still. What about the boy? I described him too. Then the older man. Pike slowly took off his hat. "Jesus," he muttered. "What?" He looked toward the dark windows, rain crawling in sheets down the glass. "There was a wreck on that curve," he said, "back in '87. Coal truck and one family sedan. Woman, teenage son, older father. All three burned in the ditch before help got there." A sound came from behind the building. Even over the rain, Even through the walls, I heard it. The payphone had stopped ringing. Now someone was talking into it. Deputy Pike heard it too. His head turned toward the back hall. "You got someone out there?" "No." He started for the rear exit. I came around the counter fast enough to surprise both of us. "Don't go back there." He gave me a look halfway between annoyance and concern. "Why?" "Because you'll answer. Because it wants you. Because the man comes at 3:07 and you're already late." Instead, I said, "Just don't." Pike's jaw tightened. He was still deciding whether I was crazy or high when the voice at the payphone rose enough to come through the storm. "Alan?" He froze. The color drained from his face. The voice came again, a woman's voice, thin with distance and rain. "Alan, baby, help me." Deputy Pike stared toward the back hall like something had reached in and gripped his spine. "My wife," he whispered. He moved. I grabbed his arm. He ripped free and shoved me hard enough that I hit the cigarette display. Then he ran down the hallway toward the back exit. I went after him because there are some disasters you chase even when you know better. He hit the rear door, yanked it open, and storm wind blasted rain through the hall. By the time I reached the threshold, he was already around the corner of the building and out of sight. "Deputy!" I shouted. Lightning flashed. For one bright white second, I saw the back lot. The ice machine stood overflowing, cubes scattered across the concrete like broken teeth. Beyond it, fixed to the brick wall, the old payphone hung with the receiver off the hook. And standing beside it in the rain was the man from 307, holding the handset out like an invitation. Deputy Pike rounded the corner toward him. The man smiled. Then the dark swallowed all of it. I ran back inside and locked the rear door. Call it cowardice, call it survival, I don't care. I stood there in the hallway with rain blowing against the glass and listened for Pike to shout, fire his weapon, do anything that sounded human. What I heard instead was the payphone receiver hitting the metal box over and over. Clang, clang, clang. Then silence. When I finally looked out through the narrow rear window 5 minutes later, Deputy Pike's SUV was still under the canopy. But the back lot was empty. No man, no deputy. No payphone receiver off the hook, just rain. The report in the paper the next day said Deputy Alan Pike had gone missing during the storm while checking flooded roads near Bell Creek. Missing. That was the word they used. Not dead. Not taken. Not vanished behind a gas station while a thing with a burned face held out a phone to him in the rain. Missing. I almost quit after that for real. I even packed my duffel and loaded it into the truck. Then I sat there in the motel lot with the engine running and realized something that made my stomach turn. If I left, 307 would still happen. Maybe not at Bell Creek. Maybe somewhere else. Somewhere without rules. Somewhere some tired clerk or deputy or driver would answer the wrong question because nobody had warned them what kind of place routine can become if you let the wrong thing nest in it. That's the lie I told myself anyway. The truth is uglier. By then I needed to know what the man was, what he wanted, why the station mattered, and some sick part of me suspected that after answering the year, I had already been let too close to walk away clean. So I came back. And on the 21st night, I decided to break the rules on purpose. I wish I could make that sound noble. It wasn't. It was the kind of stupid courage fear turns into when it has been living in you too long. I brought a tape recorder from the motel. Old little handheld thing I used to use for job notes, back when I was still doing contract electrical work. Fresh batteries. I put it under the counter at 2:50 and hit record at 3:05. At 3:07, the bell over the door rang. The man came in. Need cigarettes, matches, exact change. He watched me the whole time. Then he said, "Still trying to hear me right?" I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't told anyone about the recorder. He leaned one hand on the counter. The burned side of his face showed more clearly that night. Skin cracked in a web pattern down the jaw. One ear half gone. He smelled not like dirt anymore, but like hot metal after rain. I kept my mouth shut. He smiled. "What year is it?" I said nothing. He glanced toward the front windows, then back to me. "Do you know what people sound like when they burn?" The tape recorder kept running under the counter. I should have been terrified. I was. But I was also angry by then, and anger will make a person reckless. Tell me, I said. His expression changed, surprise maybe, or amusement. Then he nodded once, and he spoke, not loudly, but every light in the station dimmed as he did, and the air took on that same charged stillness I remembered from the moment I answered the year. I couldn't find the door, he said. That was the first trouble. Funny thing too, because I had opened it 100 times. Truck rolled, glass went, fire came in fast as breath. I knew where the latch ought to be, couldn't find it. He looked at his own hands as if seeing them from far away. Kept hearing voices outside. Men shouting, woman crying, boy hollering for his mama. I thought if I could just get turned around, his eyes lifted to mine. But the cab kept changing. The lights flickered once. In fire, he said, time don't move right. I felt suddenly horribly certain that the tape recorder was not capturing any of this. You died in the truck, I said. He gave a soft huff that might once have been laughter. Pardon me. The front door bell jingled. I turned. No one there. When I looked back, the man had moved closer. So close now I could see where bits of road grit were embedded in the creases of the burn scars. The rest kept looking for an exit, he said. Found the station instead. Then he straightened, took the matches, and headed for the door. Wait, I said. He paused. Why do you keep coming back? Without turning around, he said, because somebody always answers. Then he left. I grabbed the recorder and played it back at once with shaking fingers. The tape caught the bell over the door. My own breathing. The register beat. Coins clicking on the counter. Then a long stretch of static, thick as rain. Then, faintly under it, a second voice. Mine, saying, over and over. I couldn't find the door. I did quit after that. Not dramatically. I didn't storm into Daryl's office or throw the apron down or demand answers. I just waited until 7, handed over the keys, and said, I'm done. Daryl searched my face for a moment, then nodded like a man seeing expected weather roll in. You gonna leave town? Yeah. That might help. Might? He didn't answer. I drove west that afternoon and didn't stop until Kentucky. I made it 8 days. On the 9th night, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the motel ice machine started dispensing by itself. On the 10th, I woke to a payphone ringing somewhere outside, though the motel hadn't had one in years. On the 11th, I found a box of diamond kitchen matches on the nightstand I knew I had not bought. So I came back. Not to Bell Creek. Not right away. But eventually the road bent the way roads do, and I found work 30 miles south, then 20, then 8. Close enough that I could tell myself the pull was money, or familiarity, or the kind of dumb regional gravity that keeps people circling home long after home has poisoned them. Last I heard, Bell Creek travel stop is still open. Daryl still manages it. Night clerks still come and go. And every now and then, if you pass through around 3:07 in the morning, you may see a tall man in a brown jacket stepping out of the dark with no vehicle in the lot, walking toward the station door like he knows exactly where he's been and exactly where he's going. If you're inside when he comes, keep the coffee fresh. Don't answer the payphone. Don't open the freezer. And if he asks what year it is, keep your mouth shut. Because the truth is, I don't think he wants the date. I think he wants to know how long he's been looking for the door. And I think every time someone answers, Bell Creek gives him one more way to try. This is Horror Story Society, and you made it to the end. If you felt that chill, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.